Chapter 22. Can I Draw Your Hands? Not long after we had exchanged phone numbers, I sent Selena a short text message asking if she wanted to hang out at the tiny Pahoa library with me. Nestled up against the town's modest elementary school, I'd only been to the library once or twice before, and I felt that it would be a good, relaxing environment to get to know Selena better, a person who I increasingly couldn't get out of my mind. The library was also air-conditioned, which is a great bonus considering that August was one of the few months I ever felt uncomfortable with the weather on Hawaii. The other was February, but we'll get to that. When I arrived, she was sitting on one of the low rock walls that framed the planters, wearing a dress streaked in the colors of the rainbow, and when she saw me, her eyes lit up, and she stretched out her arms for a hug. We embraced tightly, and then headed over to the double doors. Inside, we found a spot at one of the 6 rectangular tables, and I briefly excused myself to walk over to the oversized book section, thumbing through encyclopedias, directories, and histories until I found the object of my search, the Big Bird Book. I call it the Big Bird Book because, for the life of me, I can't remember the title. Suffice to say that it was a huge book with beautiful illustrations of the birds of America, no doubt one of the many fine publications put out by the Audubon Society. When I returned to our table, I set the tome beside her, careful not to make too loud of a thud since there were people reading nearby. "Check this out," I smiled. "A lot of incredible creatures in this one." She smiled back, and together we thumbed through the large volume, admiring weird ducks, regal geese, and playful songbirds, stopping only occasionally so she could sketch one of the drawings for herself in her small notebook. Sometimes we would come across an especially silly-looking bird, like a sage grouse or a roseate spoonbill, and stop for a moment, marveling at how strange it looked. After a while, Selena pulled out a bigger sketch pad from her satchel and turned to me. "Can I draw your hands?" she asked. At first, I didn't know how to react. Even after plenty of dating adventures in Wisconsin, no one had ever asked me such a thing before. "You want to draw my hands?" I said. "I mean, they're not that special." "Yeah," she said. "You have nice hands." "Thanks. So how should I hold them? I mean, it's the first time someone has asked me that." "It's okay. You don't have to do anything special." "Okay." I tried to distract myself while she drew. There are fewer things more aesthetically depressing than hands that look self-conscious, especially when they're the focus of a drawing, so I continued to peruse the bird book. After a while, I peeked over to her drawing pad, seeing a surprisingly lifelike rendering of one of my hands. "Wow, that's really good." "You think so?" "It's a pretty quick sketch, but I like it." Somehow, she had captured the essence of her subject. The hand in her drawing was undoubtedly mine, and I was touched. From that day on, my mind was quite swept up in Selena's world, and we found any excuse to hang out. Some free time before Uncle Robert's? Let's go for a walk. Friday afternoon free? Let's do something. I soon learned that she was helping out with one of the after-school programs and loved working with children, which came as no surprise to me. And as the days washed by, she opened up to me more and more, telling me how an ex-boyfriend had left her earlier that year, for another woman no less, but she assured me that the guy was no longer on the island. Still, she seemed concerned about the situation. She didn't want ours to be a rebound relationship, and we agreed to take things slowly. The following day, Hans, one of my newer friends from the community, asked if I wanted to go on a little field trip with him to check out a piece of property he'd just bought on the east side of Puna, near the coast. I'd known Hans for a few weeks at that point, a middle-aged guy who I found to be one of the most genuine people I'd met on the island yet. So when he'd asked if I wanted to head up Government Beach Road, a route that ran along the eastern coast of the island, I didn't hesitate in saying yes. But on the way, we took a little detour down to the end of Route 132, where it devolved into a dirt road to Cape Kumukahi, the easternmost tip of the island. Unlike South Point, there wasn't too much to do at the easternmost point. That might be why people don't even call it East Point. It was a rough piece of land, created by one of the countless lava flows that had formed the island over millennia. Most of it was sharp, jumbled lava rock, quite different from the undulating hills that I'd hiked over at the Kalapana lava fields. There, the lava rock formed smooth, wavy patterns, what the Hawaiians call pahoihoi. East Point was the opposite, covered in fields of sharp, nearly impassable terrain the Hawaiians call a'a, which I can only imagine is from the sound one would make if one fell on it. Ah! So when we arrived, we didn't hike much, choosing to stay on the parts that had already been worn down a bit from foot traffic. Looking east, the waves crashed against long protrusions of lava rock that extended up from the ocean like long fingers, the water mixing and foaming all around them into beautiful blues. To my right, someone had made an elaborate memorial out of a pile of a'a, topped with a cross. In front of it was a cutout of what appeared to be the name Maki, but there were so many shirts, leis, and other decorations that it was difficult to be sure. I asked Hans about the memorial, and he guessed that someone must have died out here, perhaps on the rocks. As we turned to head back to the car, I saw the Cape Kumukahi light in the distance, a narrow, steel-framed lighthouse that had been built in the 1930s and was somewhat famous for having survived the 1960 lava flow that destroyed the town of Kapoho. Yet when the flow reached the lighthouse, it split into two streams, spilling into the sea on either side. Feeling satisfied, we took the government beach route northward, past the famously unmarked road that led to Cinderland, and down a road that tunneled through thick rainforest. Through the thick foliage, I could see that we were near the ocean at points, and after a while, we made a second stop at an area with a slope that ran all the way down to the sea, covered in smooth boulders. In a strange display, dozens of little towers made of round rocks had been stacked atop these boulders, and as the sun grew lower in the sky, the perfectly balanced towers, called cairns, appeared like eerie black silhouettes, their outlines almost human at times, standing like dark specters against the sapphire hues of the water below. After photographing some of the more striking examples, we continued north, through the tunnel of green once more, until we came to a housing development. Hans said that his plot of land was nearby, and before long, I was standing on a decent little patch of dirt surrounded by trees, hints of other buildings peeking through the foliage. His piece of land wasn't huge, but it was certainly big enough to build a house on and retire to, which was what Hans intended to do. He'd recently sealed the deal on the property, and his excitement was contagious. Listening to him talk about building a house here in paradise caused me to daydream about doing the same someday. After all, I didn't need that much space, and the land prices in Puna were some of the lowest in the state. He took me down a narrow path that led through the forest to a backyard area until we reached a stone wall. Beyond it, I could see a house in the distance, but overall, we were in an even more secluded area than before, and he said that he wanted to build a smaller structure out here. I smiled and agreed. It would be a beautiful spot for a tiny cabin. I wondered what Selena would think of this place. Did she have a goal of getting a house on the island someday? I would have to ask her later. After all, we had dinner plans the following day, and the more I thought about it, the more excited I felt. It was going to be wonderful. Spending time with her always was. On Friday, I met Selena at my favorite restaurant in downtown Pahoa, a delicious Thai establishment that was run by a family who actually were from Thailand. They'd brought their skills to Puna and soon formed a strong reputation through the sheer quality of their food. We ordered pineapple curry, and somehow Selena's presence made it taste even better than when I'd first had it months earlier. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and once again, I felt shocked to have met someone that I clicked with so much. Back in Wisconsin, I'd gone on my fair share of dates, but too often the woman was on a totally different wavelength than mine, or didn't have the qualities that I was looking for. In comparison, Selena was like a breath of fresh air, and in the coming weeks, her playful energy and kindness felt like a soothing balm upon my heart, which was feeling increasingly burned by Matangi's attitude toward the community. Around this time, Matangi had accused me of misplacing a check. The only problem was I had never been given any check. She berated me for not finding it, but after searching for it multiple times in all of the cabinets and desks, I finally gave up, telling her that I simply couldn't find it anywhere. She didn't seem to believe me, but I tried to be patient with her as I realized that it was quite likely that Matangi suffered from frequent bouts of acute anxiety. I tried to have empathy for her. After all, if I was trying to manage my business while traveling, I would probably be stressed too. During those times, Selena felt like a light of hope in an increasingly dark tunnel, and I struggled with what my next move would be. I didn't want to move into an even worse situation, and there were certainly some places that were a step down. Yet over time, they looked better and better. I mentioned this to Selena during the dinner, asking if she knew of any communities that needed a web designer or a computer expert. She didn't know of any opportunities at the moment, but was happy to keep a lookout for me. Not wanting to focus on the negative while spending time with one of the most wonderful people I'd met yet, I turned the conversation to the impending Perseid meteor shower. She said it had been years since she'd taken the time to see them, and she was excited to watch them together the following Monday, when the shower would reach its peak. After dinner, we embraced tightly, and I felt the pull to kiss her. I remembered about how she had been open with me about where she was emotionally, saying that she really liked me but wanted to take things slow since she was still healing from the breakup she'd mentioned earlier. So perhaps that's why, even given the perfect opportunity to kiss her that night, I didn't. The most she got was a kiss on the cheek. As we hugged farewell, she squeezed my hand, and I saw a torrent of emotion swirling within her eyes. Would I be able to help her heal the wounds from her past? Would she even let me? Or was my presence only making things more confusing? All of these questions rolled around in my mind that night as I struggled to get comfortable in bed, simultaneously worried for the future and feeling elated about the present. In the end, I focused on the fact that I couldn't predict the future. What was important was the present moment. At least, we truly did care about each other. We had a strong, heart-based connection, and I was so grateful for that.